Welcome to the channel. Today's story comes from 1855 about Iron Dillard. She was a black girl. The girl fire could not burn. What happened to her had no explanation, no logic, no record that made sense. This story is heavy. Take a breath. Listen closely. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and drop the city and country you're listening from in the comments. Your presence keeps these stories alive instead of forgotten. Let's begin. In the winter of 1855, something occurred on the Whitmore Plantation in Colleton County, South Carolina. Something that would be whispered about for generations. A fire consumed the main house and spread across the property in a pattern investigators later called impossible. The flames moved with what one witness described as deliberate intention. They devoured the overseer's quarters. They turned the cotton storehouse to ash. They burned the punishment shed into a memory. Yet somehow, inexplicably, the slave cabins were left completely untouched. That night, 43 enslaved people vanished. The plantation owner survived, but the next morning he was found wandering the smoking ruins, his body covered in burn scars shaped like letters. Initials. 30. 7 sets of initials burned into his flesh. He never spoke another coherent word for the rest of his life. When authorities questioned the remaining witnesses, they all said the same thing: the fire walked. It followed a girl, 20-year-old girl, who moved through the flames as if walking through rain. This is her story. This is the story of Esther Dillard, the girl they called Iron, the girl fire could not burn. To understand what happened that December night, we must go back 12 years, back to the moment Esther was born. The Whitmore plantation sat on 300 acres of low country land, about 40 miles southwest of Charleston. In 1843, the year Esther was born, the plantation held 112 enslaved people and produced roughly 400 bales of cotton annually. The owner, Randolph Whitmore, was 41 and considered himself a progressive master. He allowed his enslaved workers 1 day of rest per week. He permitted small garden plots behind their cabins. He even hired a doctor to visit twice a year to examine the workforce. In Whitmore's mind, these small mercies made him a good man. The people he owned knew differently. Esther's mother was Lily, a 230-year-old domestic servant in the main house. Lily was known for her quiet nature and careful movements. She had learned early that survival meant invisibility. The less white folks noticed you, the safer you were. She kept her eyes down, answered questions with as few words as possible, and made herself small, useful, and forgettable. For 6 years, that strategy kept her alive. The night Esther was born, a storm rolled across the low country. Witnesses remembered lightning striking the old oak tree near the slave quarters 3 times in a row. Mama Zora, the oldest woman on the plantation, was 78 that year and had delivered more babies than she could count. She caught Esther as she came into the world, and she was the first to notice something different about this child. The baby did not cry. Most newborns scream. Esther simply opened her eyes and looked around the room as if taking inventory. Mama Zora would later say the child's eyes held an old soul. A soul that had seen things. A soul that remembered. But what truly disturbed her happened moments after the birth. A candle on the windowsill had been knocked over during the delivery. The flame caught the edge of the blanket Lily lay on. In the chaos, no one noticed until the fire was already spreading. Mama Zora grabbed the newborn to pull her away, but Esther had already rolled toward the flames. Her tiny hand reached out and touched the fire directly. Mama Zora screamed, certain the baby's hand would be destroyed. Instead, the child was perfectly unharmed. The fire went out the moment Esther touched it. Her skin showed no burns, no redness, nothing. Mama Zora, from the Gullah people, had been raised on stories of spirits and ancestors, of children born with gifts from the other side. She looked at baby Esther and recognized something. She told no one what she had seen. Some things were too dangerous to speak aloud. For the first 5 years of Esther's life, nothing unusual happened, or nothing anyone noticed. Lily raised her daughter in a small cabin shared with 2 other women and their children. Esther was a quiet child, much like her mother. She watched more than she spoke, listened more than she asked. The other children found her strange. She would sit for hours staring at cooking fires, candles and lanterns. Fire fascinated her in a way that made adults uncomfortable. When Esther was 5, an event changed everything. August 1848. The summer had been brutal, over 100 degrees for weeks. The slave cabins were poorly ventilated, built with gaps that let in winter cold, but did nothing for summer heat. On the night of August 17th, a cooking fire that hadn't been properly extinguished flared up inside one of the cabins. Flames spread quickly through the dry wood. 7 people were sleeping inside, including Esther and her mother. Lily woke to thick, black, choking smoke and screaming from other families. She grabbed for Esther, but her daughter was not beside her. In the confusion and darkness, Lily could not find her child and was forced to flee, certain her daughter was dead. The cabin burned for nearly an hour. When the flames finally died, the enslaved community gathered to mourn. 6 people had escaped, 1 was missing. Little Esther, age 5, was presumed dead. Then the ashes shifted. A small figure sat up in the middle of the destruction. Esther stood completely naked. Her clothes burned away, but her body untouched. She was covered in soot but showed no burns, no blisters, no injuries. She walked out of the ashes toward her mother, who collapsed to her knees in shock. Some believed it was a miracle from God. Others believed it was the devil's work. Mama Zora said nothing but watched the child with new intensity. The news reached Randolph Whitmore by morning. He came to see the girl for himself, examining her skin for any evidence of burns or tricks. He found nothing. The child stood before him, small and silent, meeting his gaze in a way enslaved children were taught never to do. Whitmore was a practical man. He believed in science and logic, not miracles or devils. What he had heard was impossible, so there had to be an explanation. Yet something about the girl unsettled him, the way she looked at him, the steadiness in her eyes. In that moment, he made a decision that would define the next 7 years of Esther's life. He decided to test her. The first test happened that same day. Whitmore ordered a small fire built in the yard outside the slave quarters. He told his overseer, Thomas Garrett, to bring the girl forward. Lily screamed and begged but was held back. Whitmore told the child to put her hand in the fire. Esther looked at him for a long moment, then walked forward and placed both hands directly into the flames. She did not scream or flinch. She held her hands in the fire for nearly a minute while everyone watched in stunned silence. When she withdrew them, her palms were not even warm to the touch. Whitmore's practical mind struggled to process what he had witnessed. He would spend the next 7 years trying to understand it. He would fail. From that day forward, Randolph Whitmore became obsessed with the girl. He gave her a new name, Iron. It was meant as mockery, a reference to the folk belief that iron could ward off evil spirits. If the devil protected this child, Whitmore reasoned, then perhaps iron could break whatever spell she was under. The name stuck. The enslaved community adopted it, though for different reasons. To them, iron was not an insult. It was a testament to strength, a reminder that something powerful lived among them, something even the master could not destroy. The tests continued. Whitmore subjected Iron to increasingly cruel experiments over the following years. He had her hold hot coals, touch branding irons fresh from the forge, even locked her in the smokehouse for 3 days surrounded by controlled fires. Each time, Iron emerged unharmed. Each time, Whitmore's frustration grew. What disturbed him most was not her immunity to fire, but her demeanor. She never cried or begged. She simply endured, watching him with those steady eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Sometimes, after a particularly brutal test, Whitmore would wake in the middle of the night, convinced that the girl was standing at the foot of his bed. She never was, but the feeling persisted. The enslaved community developed their own theories. Some believed Iron was protected by African spirits. Others thought she was a sign from God that deliverance was coming. A few, mostly those who had converted to Christianity and abandoned the old beliefs, thought she was dangerous and should be avoided. But almost everyone agreed. There was something about this child that defied explanation. Mama Zora kept her own counsel, but on Iron's 7th birthday, she called the girl to her cabin and began to teach her. Mama Zora was the keeper of memory on the Whitmore plantation. She remembered the old stories passed down from generation to generation, stretching back to Africa. Most of the younger people had forgotten them or dismissed them as superstition. But Mama Zora understood that stories were more than entertainment. They were survival, identity, a bridge to a past that slavery tried to erase. She told Iron about Ogun. In the Yoruba tradition, Ogun is the spirit of iron and fire, the divine blacksmith who clears paths through the wilderness. He is a warrior spirit, fierce and uncompromising, associated with justice and the protection of the oppressed. Mama Zora explained that sometimes, in times of great suffering, Ogun would send his blessing to certain children. These children would be marked by fire. They would be immune to its destruction because they carried its power inside them. Iron listened without comment. She did not know if she believed, but she recognized something that felt true. She had always known she was different. Now she was beginning to understand why. Mama Zora also taught her something practical, how to control it. The old woman had observed Iron carefully over the years. She noticed that the girl's power was not simply passive immunity. It was active. Even if Iron did not realize it, small fires would extinguish themselves when Iron became calm and flare up when she became angry or frightened. The gift was connected to her emotions, to her will. Mama Zora believed it could be developed. The training happened in secret late at night, when the plantation was asleep. Mama Zora would light a small candle and have Iron practice controlling the flame with her mind. At first, nothing happened. But over weeks and months, Iron began to feel a connection, a thread between herself and the fire as real as a rope in her hands. She learned to make the flame grow larger, to shrink it, to move it, to shrink it, to bend it to her will. She told no one what she was learning, not even her mother. Some things, Mama Zora warned, were too dangerous to share. If the master ever discovered that Iron could not only survive fire but command it, there was no telling what he might do. The years passed. Iron grew from a child into a young girl, and the plantation continued its brutal rhythm. Cotton planted in spring, cultivated through summer, harvested in fall. The enslaved worked from sunrise to sunset, their lives measured in pounds of cotton picked and bales produced. The system was designed to extract maximum labor, while spending minimum resources on the people who provided that labor. It was efficient, profitable, and evil. Iron worked in the field starting at age 8. By 10, she was expected to pick 50 pounds of cotton per day. By 12, the quota had risen to 100 pounds. The work was backbreaking, the conditions dangerous. Cotton plants have sharp edges that cut hands and arms. The South Carolina sun was merciless. Dehydration, heat stroke, and exhaustion claimed lives every summer. But through it all, Iron endured. She developed a reputation as a steady worker. Not the fastest, but never failing to meet her quota. She kept to herself, speaking little, watching everything. The other enslaved people respected her, but also feared her slightly. They had not forgotten what she was, what she could do. Thomas Garrett, the overseer, particularly disliked Iron. He was a violent man who took pleasure in punishment, and Iron's immunity to certain forms of discipline infuriated him. He could not burn her. When he tried to whip her, the wounds would heal overnight, leaving no scars. It was as if her body rejected any permanent marking. Garrett interpreted this as defiance and looked for other ways to hurt her. When Iron was 11, Garrett discovered her weakness. He could not harm Iron directly, but he could harm the people she loved. One evening, Garrett caught Iron speaking with a boy named Samuel. They were just talking, sharing a few minutes of rest after the day's work. But Garrett claimed they were planning something. He dragged Samuel to the punishment post and whipped him bloody, while Iron was forced to watch. The message was clear: she might be untouchable, but the people around her were not. From that day forward, Iron understood that her gift was also a burden. Her immunity protected only her. Everyone she cared about remained vulnerable. This knowledge would shape every decision she made in the years to come. By 1855, the world outside the Whitmore plantation was changing. Tensions between North and South over slavery had reached a breaking point. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 made it a federal crime to assist runaway slaves, even in states where slavery was illegal. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 opened new territories to slavery, sparking violent conflicts. The country was moving toward war, though few could see it clearly yet. Inside the plantation, these distant events seemed almost unreal. The enslaved heard rumors and fragments of news, but their daily reality remained unchanged. They planted and picked and survived generation after generation, waiting for a freedom that might never come. Lily Iron's mother was 35 in 1855. Years of labor had aged her beyond her years. Her hands permanently calloused, her back bent from decades of bending over cotton plants. But she had survived, and she had kept her daughter alive. In the brutal calculus of slavery, this counted as success. In the spring of that year, something happened that set the final events in motion. The plantation's head cook, a woman named Bessie, was caught hiding food. She had been taking small amounts from the kitchen to feed her grandson, a sickly boy not getting enough nutrition. It was a minor theft by any reasonable standard, but Randolph Whitmore did not tolerate theft of any kind. He decided to make an example of her. Bessie was given 50 lashes. She was 62 years old. She did not survive. The enslaved community mourned in silence. They had no power to protest, no recourse to justice. But the anger and grief rippled through the quarters, adding to years of accumulated pain. Iron felt it intensely. Bessie had been kind to her as a child, slipping her extra food, telling her stories about her grandmother in Africa. Now she was dead, killed for the crime of feeding a hungry child. That night, Iron could not sleep. She lay in her cabin, staring at the ceiling, and felt something shifting inside her. The fire that lived within her, that she had learned to control and contain, was pushing against its boundaries. It wanted out. It wanted to burn. Mama Zora came to her. The old woman was 89 now, frail and nearly blind, but she still knew things. She could still sense when the spirits were moving. She told Iron that the time was coming. She did not know exactly when or how, but she could feel it. A reckoning was approaching. Iron would have to choose what kind of person she wanted to be. She could use her gift for destruction, burning everything and everyone who had hurt her, or she could use it for something greater, to save her people. Iron did not respond. She was not ready to make that choice. Not yet. 2 weeks later, her mother was accused of theft. The accusation came from Cornelius, the plantation's black overseer. Cornelius was an enslaved man given authority over other enslaved people. He carried a whip, reported infractions to the master, and enforced discipline. In exchange, he received better food, better housing, and a measure of protection from the worst abuses. Many of the other enslaved despised him as a traitor, who had sold his soul for scraps from the master's table. Cornelius claimed he had seen Lily stealing flour from the kitchen storehouse. The evidence was flimsy. No flour was found in Lily's possession, but Randolph Whitmore trusted his black overseer. It was convenient to have a black man enforce discipline on black bodies. It created division and distrust. It was a strategy as old as slavery itself. Whitmore decided that Lily would be sold, not whipped or punished on the plantation, but sold to a trader who would take her to the Mississippi cotton fields. That was in many ways a fate worse than death. The Mississippi plantations were notorious for brutality. Life expectancy there was measured in single-digit years, and Lily would be separated from her daughter forever. The sale was scheduled for June 10, 1855. Iron learned of the decision the night before. She found her mother in their cabin, packing the few possessions she was allowed to take. Lily was not crying. She had moved beyond tears into a kind of numb acceptance. This was the reality of their lives: families separated, mothers torn from children, love as a liability because it gave the masters one more weapon to use against you. Iron did not accept it. For the first time in her life, she felt the full power of her gift rising within her. Not a gentle warmth, but a roaring furnace demanding release. She could burn the entire plantation to the ground. She could kill Whitmore and Garrett, and everyone who had made their lives a living hell. She could have her revenge. But Mama Zora's words echoed in her mind. Destruction was easy. Building something better was hard. If she simply burned everything, what would happen to the 100 other enslaved people on this plantation? The children, the old and sick who could not run. Her revenge would consume them along with her enemies. She made a decision. She would not simply destroy. She would liberate. That night, Iron began to plan. She went first to Solomon, the plantation blacksmith. Solomon was 53 and had lived on the Whitmore plantation for 30 years. He was skilled at his trade, valuable enough that Whitmore had never considered selling him. But Solomon carried deep wounds. 15 years earlier, his wife and 2 sons had been sold to pay off Whitmore's gambling debts. He had never recovered. He worked mechanically, spoke to no one, and waited for death. Iron found him in the forge, working late on a set of horseshoes. She told him what she was planning. She told him about her gift, showing him a flame in her palm and letting it dance between her fingers. Solomon watched without expression. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he asked her one question: could she really get people out? Not just herself, but everyone who wanted to go. Iron told him the truth. She did not know, but she was going to try. Solomon nodded slowly. For the first time in 15 years, something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like hope. He would help her. He would forge what they needed: keys, tools, weapons if necessary. But he warned her about Cornelius. The black overseer was dangerous, not because he was strong or smart, but because he was desperate. He had built his whole identity around his position. If the slaves escaped and the plantation fell, Cornelius would lose everything. He would fight to preserve the system that gave him power, even though that system enslaved him too. Iron thanked Solomon for the warning. She had already known about Cornelius. What she did not know yet was the truth about his connection to her. The planning took time. Iron could not simply announce her intentions. She had to identify who would be willing to run and who might betray them, map escape routes, coordinate timing, and keep her mother from being sold while she put everything in place. The last part proved impossible. On June 10th, a slave trader named Marcus Webb arrived at the Whitmore plantation. He had come for Lily and 3 others. Iron watched from the fields as her mother was led to the wagon. Lily looked back once, found her daughter in the crowd, and held her gaze. No words were spoken. In that look was everything: love, grief, a desperate prayer that her daughter would survive. Then Lily was loaded into the wagon, and the wagon pulled away, disappearing down the road toward Mississippi. Iron stood frozen. The fire inside her surged and screamed, trying to escape, trying to reach out and stop the wagon. It took every ounce of control she had to hold it back. She could not act now, not in daylight, surrounded by overseers with guns. She would die and save no one. That night, something changed in Iron. The girl who had endured 7 years of tests, who had watched and waited and learned to control herself, was gone. In her place was something harder, something colder that had made a decision. She would not just escape or liberate her people. She would make Randolph Whitmore pay for every life he had destroyed, in a way he would never forget. The next morning, Iron went to Mama Zora one final time. The old woman was dying, sustained by sheer will and the knowledge that she had one more task to complete. Now, with Iron before her, she could feel that task coming to its end. She told Iron the last piece of the story, the part she had held back for 12 years. On the night Iron was born, during that terrible storm, Mama Zora had seen something. When lightning struck the oak tree 3 times, she saw a figure standing beneath it. A figure made of flame, shaped like a man, burning with impossible intensity. The figure looked toward the cabin where Lily was giving birth, nodded once as if confirming something, and disappeared. Mama Zora believed she had seen Ogun himself, the spirit of iron and fire, come to witness the birth of one of his children. He had marked Iron for a purpose, not just survival or personal power, but liberation. Iron listened. She did not know if she believed in Ogun, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was going to free her people, burn down the system that enslaved them, and find her mother no matter how long it took. Mama Zora smiled, touched Iron's face with her withered hand, and said she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. She died that night, peacefully, with a smile on her face. The enslaved community buried her beneath the oak tree where Ogun had appeared. Iron stood at the grave as the sun rose and made a silent promise. She would honor Mama Zora's faith, honor her ancestors, become the warrior they had prayed for. The fire inside her burned steady and strong, waiting to be unleashed. December was 6 months away. Iron had work to do.